Good morning. My name is Rebecca Bruner, and we're at the Museum on Main, and I'm with Mark Sweeney. Today it is December 16th, 2024. And Mark, I really wanted to interview him because he's been so instrumental in the Hacienda Business Park, along with Joe Callahan and Patrick O'Brien. So, Mark, how did you ever get to Pleasanton? Where did your whole history start?
Well, I'm a native Californian.
Okay.
Born and raised in San Diego. My father was sanding the sides of DeSoto's as they came down the line in Detroit, standing in knee-deep water, and decided that he would go west until he hit the Pacific Ocean, turned left, and stopped at the Mexican border. And so I got to grow up in San Diego instead of Detroit. So spent my youth in San Diego. When I was 18, I was drafted into the Army. And actually, I was...
What year was that?
That was in 1966.
So Vietnam.
Yes. And I was an infantryman in Vietnam.
Okay.
And I was out of the Army when I was 20 years old. I had spent most of a year in the bush in Vietnam and was back on the street in San Diego in 1968. I went to college in San Diego where I met my wife, and when she got her teaching credential, she wanted to move back home, and in her case, home was Los Altos.
Okay.
So she came back up here, and I followed her here, and we've been married 48 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And have two children. I got into the real estate business in about around 75, and was a shopping center leasing and sales person.
What made you go into real estate?
Well, my oldest brother suggested that in order to get ahead in the world, he probably needed to sell something. And he was in commercial real estate.
Oh, okay.
Sort of introduced me to it. And from there, I went to Coldwell Banker, and my territory was the Bay Area. The shopping center salespeople typically have a much bigger region than, say, somebody that does R&D leasing or office leasing.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I was doing just fine when I got a call, and somebody wanted to introduce me to Joe Callahan in Hacienda Business Park, because Joe had decided that in order to have a market, a commercial market, you needed commercial brokers. So he wanted to build a brokerage company in Pleasanton that would serve to attract users to Hacienda Business Park. So I met Joe, we hit it off on the spot. I hired on, moved the family from Los Gatos to Pleasanton, and we built CPS, a brokerage company.
And that was 1984?
That was 1984, and Hacienda was well underway. And I think you probably heard from Patrick and Joe, if you've interviewed them, that in April of 84, April the 10th actually, of 84, there was a vote in Pleasanton to decide whether to approve Hacienda. The problem was that the streets were in, and several buildings were built, and we were asking the citizens if it would be okay to have done that. I mean, seriously, we were out of business if the citizens said no.
Why did it happen that way? Why?
Because in those days, it was just Katie bar the door. Joe was a go and blow kind of a developer. He took huge chances, and that was a big one. Thankfully, I didn't realize what I was into, but when I came to Hacienda, show up for work on the first Monday, and okay, where's the real estate? And they said, well, actually, we're going to walk a precinct. I was like, what? Yeah, we need to We need to walk the precincts.
To get the
because, see,
voters.
If we don't win the election, you're out of a job. I just moved my family to Pleasanton, and we had to do it ourselves. Our opposition said these fat cat developers are going to spend $500,000 on this campaign, and I think we probably spent $5,000 on the campaign. And they didn't spend any money, so they said that we outspent them 5,000 to 1. But we couldn't spend a lot of money to buy votes, right? So we had to walk precincts and go door to door, which we did.
And what were people saying?
The citizens got it.
Okay.
In post-Proposition 13, California, Pleasanton, the Ken Mercers and Frank Brandes and Walt Woods, Bob Butlers, and Karen Moore, who were on the city council in those days, remembered that in post-Prop 13, Pleasanton, they couldn't mow the sports park. There was no money. And so they got it, that if Hacienda succeeded, we'd fill the coffers with tax revenues. It was so successful in the early years that the city of Pleasanton spent all the money that they could legally spend and had gobs of it left over. So in those days, you had to go back to the citizens and ask them, what do you want to do? Spend it on infrastructure, or should we reimburse you? The citizens in these two Prop 4 elections voted to finish infrastructure, which included building the library, building the grade separations on Bernal at Case Avenue, where that was an at-grade crossing of a railroad track.
Right.
The same thing at Valley and Stanley.
Right.
And so those kinds of infrastructure were installed in Pleasanton in Prop 4 tax revenues that were just tons of money came in.
Because of Hacienda.
Because of Hacienda and the mall.
Yeah.
I mean, just North Pleasanton development in general. So,
Ah.
So it was, we won the election. Actually, I like to say that we weren't sure over the years that we actually won, because it turns out that the commercial real estate market does this, and it does this.
Yes.
So in 1984, we had a big ice sculpture at our Christmas party.
Oh.
We had 2 oyster shuckers.
Oh.
We were rolling. In 1986, we had a can of mixed nuts at our Christmas party. The market was through the floor. So, but it came back and went down, it came back and went down. And it's not for the faint of heart.
Yes, but as a developer, that's really, hard to live through those downtimes.
And we had, Prudential Insurance Company was the co-developer of the business park. And they were the deep pockets, obviously, compared to these 3 Irish guys.
I was going to say, yes, is that one of the reasons you feel like you guys all got along well? I mean, here you're all Irishmen. It's so funny that the 3 of you as partners,
Well, yeah, I think, you've met Patrick and Joe.
Yes.
They're exceedingly easy to get along with.
They are.
Good guys, take their lumps, they'll point fingers. They, would pull an oar, and
you must have been just like them.
Well,
to get along.
I was junior to the 2 old guys.
Okay.
But we had a lot of laughs. There were precarious circumstances on occasion, but we got through it. We paid all our bills. The banks always got paid, and we're still standing. We're still friends.
Yeah, and it doesn't always happen.
In my case, 40 years.
Yeah.
And like I mentioned to you off camera, that Patrick and Joe go back even further. You know, they were, Patrick was Joe's personal CPA in the early to mid 70s, before Hacienda.
And so then, so you guys formed a partnership of some sort with Prudential.
Yeah, it was, Prudential had their land in Hacienda and their buildings, and then we had our own.
Okay.
And it worked out great for as far as I was concerned. I hung in there until Prudential sold its very last piece. We sold it to Lincoln Property Company, actually, up near the BART station in 1999. So I was there from 84 to 99. And I've worked in Hacienda since, but not on Hacienda. I was involved in several redevelopment projects in Hacienda.
Like what?
Well, in some of the apartment complexes, up near the BART station there at Willow and Owens, as an example, that was a vacant piece of property that Shackley Corporation had purchased but not used. So they resold that. And then there's several other housing developments. One condo project that Signature Properties built on the southwest corner of Las Positas and Stone Ridge Drive. So yeah, I did a bunch of residential deals in Hacienda, and I also worked on other projects in Pleasanton, the 100-acre bush property.
Okay.
It's called Ironwood.
Yep.
It's there's the Villages at Ironwood as an example, that gated senior project.
Yeah.
And then that project was built by another really super highly regarded home builder, Ponderosa Homes. And in that entitlement, we thought saddled with a condition of approval to build an apartment complex, a rent-restricted senior housing project. And we built it in 2003 and 4, and we still own it, and it's a tremendous asset. I love that place. It's called the Gardens at Ironwood.
It's very nice, yes.
And so so I've had my hand in other Pleasanton projects outside of Hacienda.
As a commercial real estate broker or as a developer?
As both.
Both.
Yeah,
Okay.
both.
And when you say we still own?
Yeah, Ponderosa and I still own the
okay.
apartments. We built them 20 years ago. It's all fancied up this week for Christmas.
Oh.
So yeah, it's and if you went down the list of the names of our tenants, you would definitely recognize a lot of names of families that were family in Pleasanton might have raised kids. The kids went off on their own. Mom and dad sold the house. They downsized into the Gardens at Ironwood.
And we really needed something like that for people to downsize into, right?
No question.
Yeah. So what you were talking about Hacienda, and how many acres was it total?
It's
You can remind me.
783, I think, net of streets. So it's pushing almost 900, including infrastructure.
Okay.
So it was pretty ambitious. It was big.
Yeah, yes. And you talked about re-entitling, and tell me about the entitlement process, what that means.
Well, it was swamps.
Yes,
I mean,
people duck hunted out there.
Joe duck hunted there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he couldn't hit the broadside of a barn, but that's another story.
Okay.
He fired the warning shots,
Oh.
Joe.
To the ducks, yes.
Yeah.
Fly away, fly
yeah.
away.
So you go to the municipality and make a proposal, saying, we'd like it to be zoned for these uses on these terms. And it's a negotiation. And if the municipality thinks it makes sense, they'll approve your proposal, and off you go. And sometimes it requires the citizens to weigh in. The city council in the city of Pleasanton had approved the project, but there were citizens who disagreed with that, collected signatures and put it on the ballot. And once it got that approval, the one I mentioned on April 10 of '84, that's a pretty strong entitlement. When you get the vote of the people, that sticks. So it did. But it turned out that those entitlements didn't allow users to really put down roots in Hacienda, particularly those users that thought they might need more space in the future. So one of the leading opponents of Hacienda was a guy named Ben Tarver. He was elected with the city council and then elected mayor.
Right.
And so when we found ourselves in a position to need to go back to the city for re-entitlement, to change the deal,
Okay.
we met with Ben. And we made that deal.
And how did you?
Well, he realized, Hacienda was a reality,
Yeah.
and the city got its pound of flesh. He always looked out for the community.
Okay.
That's what he was supposed to do.
Yes.
You can have sort of adversarial relationships with the electeds, but I have to say that I worked with 7 mayors
In Pleasanton.
in Pleasanton
Okay.
over 40 years.
Mhm.
And we always eventually came to an agreement. So, and I get it. Tom Pico is another example of somebody, he looked out for the interest of the citizens. That's what he that was his charter, and he did a good job. Obviously, Ken Mercer
Yes.
and Bob Butler and Frank Brandis, in those days they would appoint the mayor amongst themselves. Ken Mercer was the first elected mayor. He really got it, they all did. They realized that Hacienda was here, it wasn't going anywhere, let's make the best of it. And so the outcome of those negotiations was usually positive. Sometimes it took longer than we liked. But I have to say that we were very fortunate during that re-entitlement time to have Deborah Acosta McKeon now. She got it. She knew that a failed business park on 580 was not a good idea.
No.
So, and they didn't bend over backwards. They looked out for the community, and but it worked out fine for us and for them.
So who did it bring in that might not have come?
I think I mentioned PeopleSoft.
Ah.
PeopleSoft bought way more land than they needed initially, but they knew that, okay, next year or the year after, if things go well, we could build another building.
Yeah.
The same thing with Roche. Roche bought 33 acres, and they still have 12 acres vacant, and they've owned it for 32 years.
But you never know. They still can build. Yeah.
Yeah, and they 33 acres is a good-sized piece of property.
Yeah.
And you have this building sitting in the corner, and then the next year another building, and 2 years another. So they've built out this campus. They haven't used it all, but they knew they could. Their entitlement was locked in, and so that they knew there was going to be sewer capacity and water, and that their traffic impacts were measured in 1992 based on the build-out of the entire project.
Okay.
So the city streets could accommodate the ultimate amount of traffic, even though they were only contributing a small portion in 1992.
Okay.
And so that was super important. And those are the Roches and the PeopleSofts were the exact kind of user that you wanted to attract.
Yes.
Because, you know, high-paying jobs, high-profile companies. So during I'm thinking about this, maybe around 90, 91 is when this took place, where we needed to re-entitle. And then Prudential burned through the balance of their land, and I was working not for them, but with them.
Okay.
And once I sold the
Acting
last
as
piece,
their
broker.
yeah.
And once we sold the last piece, then I moved on.
And so what are you doing now?
Same thing.
Okay.
Not in Pleasanton.
Okay.
I spend a fair amount of time at the apartments. It's a
Yeah.
good-sized project, you know. It's a couple of hundred residents and 172 units. And it's 20 years old, and it takes a lot of attention. I've worked with Signature Properties and Summerhill and Ponderosa Homes and others on various parcels around the Bay Area to entitle it for residential development. I've probably, in the last 25 years or so, that's pretty much all I've done. And so I got a couple things going now. And,
Okay.
Yeah.
But not in Pleasanton right now?
Not in Pleasanton, other than the apartments that we own.
Yes. How do you feel, has it gotten harder to get residential properties together to, you know, to start those developments now than it was years ago?
It's always been pretty hard in California, and that's why we have massive housing shortage. I don't care what anybody says. It's we basically disenfranchised our children and grandchildren through restrictive land use. Yeah, it's we have $4 million production homes in Pleasanton. Come on, that's just not sustainable.
Yeah.
You know, it's not. So it's difficult, and I get it. You know, people don't want. That's not in my backyard.
Not in, yeah.
But I just don't think it's long-term sustainable.
So what do you think what's the solution?
Oh, it's, well, it wouldn't hurt if our state legislators really understood housing and the economics of housing. They don't. And so most of the laws that have been passed, some of them are trying to make a difference, but still there's a lot of opposition to housing. So I don't really have a solution other than build more houses.
But the land is so expensive.
It really is, and that's just a supply and demand thing. It's really dear.
Because your apartment complex, you know, has certainly served a great need. And yet, it would be great, I'm sure you're aware of like Goldcrest and those single family, zero lot line homes that they built years ago are also another good alternative for older people, but they're over $1 million now.
Yeah, I mean, that's,
They're over $1 million,
Think about
and
that.
yeah, and they're like,
you know, I've never had $1 million mortgage on a home.
oh, yeah.
It's
And there's no way you'd want to, yeah.
No, I mean, I wouldn't. I paid $29,500 for my first house, and my house payment was $235. I have friends wanting to do an intervention. They thought I had lost my mind. They said, how could you possibly afford this?
Really?
Yeah. And my kids both have $1 million mortgages. and they're not living high on the hog.
Yeah,
It's just,
the way it is.
it
And
is, that's, oof.
because to build those,
Yeah.
again, for like seniors or for people starting out, to have those smaller homes that did have a garage and they've got zero lot line, but so they have somewhat of a yard, it's really a good alternative, but the cost of land, I would guess,
It's
makes it really
really, really
prohibitive.
millions of dollars to the acre a lot of times. And exactions, fees, tap fees, sewer, water, drainage, impact fees, traffic, schools, those type of things. They're high, really high. They're pushing $300,000 a unit in places like Pleasanton and elsewhere. Um, that's getting up there.
Yeah.
And,
What do you think of Mellow Roots?
I if we all had bonds to pay, what happens with Belarus so often is that one neighbor is paying it and the others don't. And people get, well, you don't walk on my sidewalk, or that's not the solution.
Okay.
In my opinion. It hasn't worked all that well, and I think most municipalities would agree with that.
Okay. Because I know some of the Central Valley, around our area, we don't do Mellow Roofs.
Right.
Yeah. But,
Yeah,
okay.
it's there's a lot of vacant land out there, but people don't want it to be housing generally. That would bring up, if there was a fair amount of land available that was suitable for housing, that would bring prices down on
Yeah.
the house, on the land, for sure.
Yeah.
It's supply and demand,
right.
so that's how it works.
Yeah. So it's a tough business that you've been in.
Brutal.
Yeah.
And you have, I'm a very patient person. It's just,
You'd have to have patience.
but it takes years and years and years sometimes to get, not because it's a bad idea.
Yeah.
Frequently, when you finally get to the city council, 5 people will raise their hand
Yeah.
and say yes. But it's just, it took 7 years to ask 5 people in Pleasanton whether an apartment complex on the southeast corner of Willow Road and Owens Drive made sense.
7 years.
7 years. And all 5 of them said, well, of course, it's across the street from Bart. So where you been all my life? It's 7 years.
Going in front of other city councils that didn't approve it, or
No.
just the whole process?
The
Is that
process
okay?
is just, it's just years and years and years, because you have opposition, especially to higher density housing.
Yeah.
And rental housing in particular. But I mean, look at rents. It's just, that we actually have $4,000 a month rents in Pleasanton, in apartments. It's just,
And it's rent. Yeah.
just rent.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not good.
Yeah. So would you encourage anyone to go into developing as young people?
If you can play the long game, yeah. I still think that actually I've met really lots of nice neighbors, of projects, and it's not always obstinance. I get it,
Yeah.
they've had nobody living back there for the whole time they've been here, right?
Yeah.
And so but very frequently, and this is what the standard from city council people, the standard was satisfy the neighbor's concerns, or
Okay.
make a really, really good attempt at it. And if you have a couple of holdouts that are, that are just, uncompromising, the city council would still approve the project. So that's what we did. We would meet the neighbors more than halfway and frequently get their support. Yeah.
And so Ironwood, was that a difficult thing to get through? I mean, that's, again, senior housing, but it's expensive.
Um, the villages?
Yeah,
Yeah, the villages, Ponderosa built 110 of those houses. More than 70% of them were sold to Pleasanton residents.
what does that say?
That
Yeah,
moved down,
yeah,
and they lived in a 5-bedroom, 4-bath in Pleasanton Valley. They sold the home and moved to what they consider to be Camelot. They
Yeah.
loved that place.
yeah,
And so that 100-acre project was interesting because in order to gain the approval, we ended up with 3 separate neighborhoods that are accessed, that you can't go from one neighborhood to the other other than an emergency vehicle could. But we split the traffic up, some of it on Moore Avenue, some of it on Camp, and some of it on Bush Road into the project. And so the neighbors were like, okay, I don't have it all.
yeah.
It's, they bought into that
Okay.
idea. We had agreed that within 25 feet of the back fence, we won't allow anything to be built. Okay, that keeps the shed from my property line.
Yeah.
In some cases, we actually increased the backyards of homeowners that abutted the property, maybe.
Oh, okay. Gave them a little more land.
And gave them a stipend for the landscape.
Yeah.
Built new back fences. And we didn't consider it really like being extorted. It was just a negotiation. And we optioned 24 acres to the school district for $1 for 5 years because they weren't sure that they might want to build that STEM high school.
Right.
And after about 3 years, they decided that they definitely were not going to. So Ponderosa bought the option back.
For $1.
No, not for $1.
Oh, they had to buy, oh,
Oh, yeah. I forget the exact number, so
okay.
I don't, but let me put it this way, well over $1 million.
yes.
So Ponderosa bought the option back, but when we put all the pieces together, then the city council was able to say yes. We had 0 opposition.
It's a nice looking project.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
It's absolutely stunning.
Yeah.
And the apartments are great, and like I said,
Yeah.
definitely. I mean, we have frictional vacancy in the apartments. On occasion, people will transition into, say, assisted living.
Yeah.
We actually, lose some of our residents who die. We have people moving in with family, but when we have a vacant unit,
It isn't
we
vacant
got
lot.
10-mile-long
Yeah.
application. I mean, we have people waiting in the wings to move in. So,
Which is lovely. We need more of that.
we definitely do.
Now, Prudential is an insurance company, and they did Hacienda with you, but do they do much developing anymore? Was that an anomaly?
Well, and for a period of time, the big insurance companies got into the development business. I think they're concentrated primarily on other lines of business besides development. I haven't come across any Hacienda, or Prudential Insurance Company of America. That's the big company.
Okay,
That was the developer of the business part.
yeah,
And I don't know if Joe mentioned this to you, but Joe was a believer that if you went to where the labor force lived, you could build commercial buildings and succeed. So he was into demographics big time. And so not everybody that worked in Palo Alto or Menlo Park wanted to make that commute. And Joe tied up a piece of property in Milpitas, Oak Creek Business Park, 225 acres. And he said, all these employees are driving past this vacant land every day. And if I build a business park, their boss will take space.
Yeah.
And it was just a massive home run. I mean, they were, wow, they couldn't build buildings fast enough. So Joe concluded that if 225 acres is this good, what would 750 be like? Okay, Joe. So
Yeah.
he came out, tied up all these properties, and put it all together. And Joe was like the music man.
Oh,
I mean, he was just, he could talk the birds out of the trees. It's unbelievable. And it was hard to say no. So
yeah.
we all jumped on board, and it was going and blowing, and a lot of fun. I mean, we would have, when we built the building, we would have a party and invite half the town. I mean, we'd have 2,000 people there with live music. It was a lot of fun.
It was just a lot of fun.
It really was.
And all of you lived here at the time, or?
Well, yeah, Joe, we all three live here now.
Yeah.
Joe lives in Pleasanton, Patrick lives in Castlewood, and I live in Pleasanton.
Yeah.
Joe moved out here. Patrick and I lived here in '84, and I think Joe moved out here in around '87 or '88. But yeah, we're still here, had a great time. I'd love to do it again.
Would you?
Yeah. I would do some things differently.
Like what?
Well,
Anything come to mind?
Well, I think if I could do Hacienda over again, I would definitely I would phase it a little more than it was phased. And I think it was just, it's too big, frankly. Too big for one use. I think I would have gone to the community and tried to convince them that half of it should have been housing from the beginning, and half of it. So if you were going to build 5 million feet of commercial buildings instead of 10 million feet, but you build some apartments and condos and single-family homes, it would have been a more successful project.
And so you like how it's developed now that there is housing in the park?
It did activate the business park.
Yeah.
At night, I mean, if you drove through there in August, you'll see people walking their dog and all. If weekends there are people out, but if it was a 100% business, it would be
Ghost town.
Saturday and Sunday, there would be nothing
Yeah.
going on.
Yeah.
But I think that the concern at the time about residential was you build in your own opposition, because folks move there, buy a house, want that land across the street to stay vacant. So that
Yeah.
was but I think if you had taken Stone Ridge Drive as the dividing line
Yeah.
between north and south and did half of it in housing, and I think Joe and Pat would agree with that.
Yeah.
It's just easy to look back. It's
Yeah.
2020 vision is, incredibly clear.
Yes. So much easier than.
Oh, yes. So, yeah.
So, did you also have the philosophy that I heard from Joe? Joe had, I know that I've heard that the people that Joe would work with, that you guys would hire, subcontractors, whatever, that you would expect them to help the community, to give back.
Right here,
Yes,
Amador Theater.
yes,
The truth, yeah, Joe, he's not unique in that way. There are a lot of pretty philanthropic, successful business folks that are successful. A lot of them give back. Joe was one of them. Yeah.
well, you and Patrick must have bought into that as well. Or believed that.
Taking the last nickel off the table. It was never Patrick or mine or Joe's. These community projects that we were involved in were fantastic they're good for the community. The museum on Main Street
Yeah.
and the Avenue Theater, it needs to be replaced now, but 40 years ago it was remodeled, and it needed it bad. So if we infused a lot of the capital and we brought in the subcontractors to do the electrical and the plumbing and whatever else, the roofs, what the community brought was all kinds of energy and lots of people that we got to know that were just fabulous to know. And that, I think that just engaging with the community on that level, where people are working like field hands on behalf of the community, that appealed to Joe. And Pat and I too, but it was primarily Joe that got that going. And we've made lifelong friends, lots of them out of that. You know, there are just a ton of people that came to assist any way they could if we put in the capital.
And I don't know of anyone who's doing that right now in Pleasanton. And like you said, that was such a gift to the museum. I mean, this building was, I guess,
Boarded up.
Oh, it was, yeah, the board. Oh,
I mean, it was dilapidated.
yeah, it had to be
And it
totally.
was worth saving.
Oh,
I
yes.
mean,
The history behind this building
Yes.
and its location. Yeah. Yeah.
so yeah, and really, I'm not trying to, like we're these super good-hearted. We were out to make a buck. Okay, I mean that's it's
Yeah.
an American enterprise,
Right.
but giving some back was
But to give
felt
back
pretty good.
and to ask your people that you work with, this is what we believe and we would like you to
Yeah.
do this too for the city,
And they did.
Yeah.
They really stepped up.
Yeah. Did anyone say they would not do anything
Not that I remember. They probably didn't work for us.
very long if they
Yeah,
did?
it was- and we expect them to make a buck. I mean, they have
Right.
a payroll.
Right.
It's not. There was enough to go around. Let's put
Yeah.
it that way.
Well, you helped a lot of companies get going and get bigger because of the work you gave them.
Yeah. I mean, Joe was very loyal to his contractors.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there anybody else that played a major role in the Hacienda thing at that time that we should interview? Or I interviewed Deborah Acosta and Nelson and the three of you, Frank Capilla,
Great
and
guy,
he says
guy.
great things about you guys. Yeah. Trying to think who.
I mean,
Brad
just-
Hurst.
Well, sure. I mean, all those folks, and Ed Kenny, and I mean, the list goes on and on. But I mean, you can't interview Ken Mercer, may he rest in peace.
Yeah.
But and Bob Butler too. I mean, he's gone. They would have agendas that were just chock full of weighty issues every other Tuesday night. And I mean, Karen Long, she was elected 4 times to the city council. She made hundreds of important decisions. And we were very, very lucky to have conscientious decision makers who took their jobs very seriously.
Anybody else you'd like to give a shout out to that you felt was went over and beyond? And
I hate to start because
you leave someone out. Yeah.
I leave somebody out.
Yeah.
But I still see lots of people that we knew 40 years ago that were instrumental in the success here. There was such a vibe in Pleasanton. It was such a cool place. You know that. You lived here. You and I lived around the corner
Right,
from
right.
one another for years.
Yeah.
And there was so much community spirit in Pleasanton. It's great.
Yeah.
And I think it's fabulous. It's amazing to me that I'll call San Ramon part of the Tri-Valley,
Okay.
but it's in another county. But there's a lot of good things going on there. Same thing in Dublin. in Livermore, off the charts. I mean, that place is happening.
Isn't
and
it?
there's so much enthusiasm for the community. It's infectious.
Yeah,
It really is.
yeah,
So we live in a region where people take so much pride in their communities and are willing to invest in them. And it keeps me going. It's great.
that's good. That's great. Yeah. Okay, well, any last words about
No, thank
anything
you.
that you'd like to have different in Pleasanton, or are you good with
No, it's I'm way
an
down the
ongoing
runway
process?
here.
Yeah.
Been at it for 40 years in Pleasanton, and still love the community and
Did your wife teach you
no.
when you moved to
Once we
Pleasanton?
started having kids, she
Yeah.
was a stay-at-home mom for the most part. She volunteered a lot in the community, but now she's back helping to raise grandchildren.
Yeah,
I'm sure you know.
yeah,
It's
that's
just,
delightful.
oh, yeah, it's a joke. I'm nuts about mine. I tell people that I think I was reasonably conversant before I had grandchildren. Not all that interesting, I'll grant you. But if you don't want to talk about my grandkids, don't talk to me. Because that's what I talk
That's
about.
what you talk about, yeah, yeah,
Yeah, all good.
yeah.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Mark.
You're
Really
quite welcome.
appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm glad you're doing
And we
this for
Glad
posterity.
you, yes, and so glad we got your history.